All right, Starbase Indy, are you ready for Star Trek Mirror War comic book artist Gavin Smith?
Thanks, everybody.
There you go.
All right.
Welcome to the stage, Gavin.
Thanks for having me.
I'm the heir of the StarPodTrek podcast. We celebrate Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future, and you are now part of this vision.
Yeah.
An alternate vision, though.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm going to do the Picard pose here. But I hope it doesn't fall over. It's interesting thing to be a part of Star Trek that doesn't really get, no pun intended, explored very much because it's the mirror universe, especially within the Next Generation line. And it's nice to be able to get to be part of that history, or I guess evolving history of it, because like it said, never got touched on in the show.
Which is amazing when you think about it, because that was one of the all-time most popular episodes, was the Mirror Universe.
Right. Yeah.
I distinctly remember as a kid, my me freaking out seeing Mr. Spock with a goatee, and my father said, "Ooh, look, he has a goatee," and I'm like, "It's a beard." And he's like explaining, "No, this is a beard, this is a goatee, this is a Van Dyke."
Right.
Like there was actually an educational moment there for me. We had the Mirror Universe in Deep Space Nine. But it skipped Next Generation. But the comic book universe, produced by IDW Comics,
Yes.
they explored that aspect that we never saw on television.
Right, and luckily we get to kind of the writers Scott and David Tipton brothers, who are they have the keys to the kingdom as far as the mirror universe goes at IDW. They put together a story that takes place within the same universe as Mirror, so it's not straying too far beyond what we already know about the mirror universe, and kind of inserts it right before Deep Space Nine episodes as well. So we got a nice groundwork to play with, which is cool.
Okay, so right here we see on the stage, this is a sample
Yeah.
of Mirror War, covers by J.K. Woodward,
Great guy.
who's been on our show before. He's a fantastic guy.
Oh yeah,
Super fan. That's one of the dream jobs.
Right.
But let's go back a little bit and
Sure.
talk about your childhood, the things that you loved, and how you got involved in comics.
Sure. Yeah.
And this will help us to appreciate and come full circle
Yeah.
of how you got involved in Star Trek Mirror War. So where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
I grew up in Peru, Indiana, so just right up north in 31, or whatever it's called these days. I think it's 931 now, but not anyway. US 31, straight ahead. I went to Peru High School, grew up there, just drawing. I grew up going to a little comic shop called Bears Cards and Comics, which is unfortunately shut down now. But I would go there and I would spend hours there, just like tearing through back issues and being told this is not a library. And I grew up reading Batman, Justice League, whatever I can get my hands on, Green Lantern, Flash, and then I just grew to love comic books, and I was drawing it all the time. I'd get in trouble in class for drawing all the time.
Isn't that so much fun, though?
Oh, it's great.
It's just amazing that a kid is following his passion, doing something productive, but gets in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're able to laugh in the face of those who
it's great.
who heckled you.
I had when I released my first comic book, it was called Human City, and it was a self-published thing. I had one of my teachers, my second grade teacher, actually showed up to my signing. So I had to sign a copy of that.
How awesome is that?
That was pretty cool.
So about what time period were you really getting into comics? To give us a time stamp.
Probably around like 94, 95 was when I was reading a lot more.
And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was
huge. Oh, absolutely.
During that time,
that was,
right?
I grew up, one of the first movie experiences I had was watching the 1990 Ninja Turtles. Like that's I remember seeing the 89 Batman movie in the theaters, and Ninja Turtles. Those were the first two movies I remember seeing in a theater. And
this was the time period, early 90s.
Yeah.
If you remember, comic shops were everywhere.
Right.
Image was the big deal.
Image was the big deal, like,
Rob
yeah.
Liefeld, Todd McFarlane. We're talking the era of creators were breaking away from Marvel and DC, and everyone was embracing the independent comic scene.
Oh, absolutely.
How did that affect you?
I think I just missed it. Like, right when the Image boom happened, because I might have just been getting... So my stuff was, I was reading... And I was reading a lot of DC at the time. I was a big DC guy growing up.
So was that 0 Hour?
0 Hour was in that mix. I remember...
Death of Superman?
Death of Superman was there, and Reign of Superman, Batman vs. Predator was around that time.
Nightfall
was there. I remember what else? Kingdom Come was huge for me.
That was a big deal.
Elseworld stuff was big for me. And then and then I was watching Ninja Turtles, reading Ninja Turtles as well. And it's something that's kind of always stuck with me. I was reading the Archie Ninja Turtle stuff at that time. And then, kind of fast forward, getting to junior high, high school, and I'm not reading comics as much anymore because no one else around me is reading comics, and I'm like, all right, I'm the only one participating. I'm still kind of reading them on my own whenever I come back home from.
It was a different world back then. Right now, geek is chic.
That's the thing, and like that's what's crazy to me because like it seems like I don't want to call anybody like fake geeks or anything like that, but it just seems like very revisionist. Where everyone was into it, and I was like, nobody was into it.
Yeah.
I was getting, like, nobody cared when I was
admitting to being it.
No one admitting to being it. Good point.
Right. Yeah. And, whenever we would go to my grandparents' house, my mom would always stop back through Indianapolis, and we'd always stop at, like, she'd go shopping like TJ Maxx and Marshalls or something. She'd drop me off at like Walden Books or Books A Million or something like that. And I'd just go to the graphic novel section.
I'd sit there for hours.
Yeah,
in Walden
I would
Books.
sit in the middle of the aisle and that was the first time I read Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Of course.
Yeah, just sitting in the middle of Borders or something like that. And
George Perez.
Yeah,
I mean, just
George was great.
His layouts, his storytelling, his formulas.
Yeah, I took a lot from George, especially like when it comes to making panels as busy as possible and just drawing everybody and a million people. George was a huge influence on me. Then fast forward to I graduated high school. I did a year at Ball State, and I started drawing again. I was drawing for fun, and then didn't care much. I only did a year at Ball State. Started doing, grown-up stuff. And I got my first job, my grown-up job, where I was making decent money. And I was like, well, now I can actually start collecting comics again. So I started going, and I was living in Kokomo, and I was delivering newspapers for the New York Times and Chicago Tribune all over the state. So I'd go into Kokomo Comics, which is now Comics Cubed in Kokomo. And I was starting collecting again. So I buy my own stuff.
Isn't that funny how that works? Like, once you have that bug,
yeah,
you might put it on the back burner a little bit, but
it's
always there.
Hard. I'm like, I made up for lost time. I was reading, I was a big fan of Mark Waid's Flash Run, so I ended up buying all of Mark Waid's Flash Run. Like at that point, I was just like, I've got money. I'm going to drop $100 on this guy's back issues of the whole run, which is funny because now I've worked with Mark Waid. But yeah, and then as I'm reading these comics, like newer comics that are coming out, I see an ad in the back that says the Joe Kubert School is still active. And that was something I had seen as a kid.
Forever.
Yeah.
And since the 70s, those ads were running.
Mm-hmm. And it was like a pipe dream of mine. Kind of like, I'd love to go to there. And then I saw it still existed, and I was like, well, why not? Like, it was like good timing. I was about 22. And
just for those in the audience who are not familiar with the Joe Kubert School of Art,
yeah,
let's explain how almost everyone that's really into comics was exposed to what this is, and explain what this school does and their alumni.
So Joe Kubert is probably one of the great war artists of all time, but he worked in comics since he was about 13, maybe 12. Maybe 11. It's kind of everywhere. Nobody knows for sure. But, and he works...
This is before labor laws.
Yeah, right. and it was just, you could walk into a cartoonist studio back in the 30s, and like, if you had any ounce of talent, they would put you to work.
Which is crazy to think that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So he'd been working in comics for that long. He started a school in the 70s named after himself, the Joe Kubert School, help aspiring cartoonists get to where they need to be. So like some people in that first class were like Steve Bissett, Tom Mandrake, and Rick Veitch, a lot of guys that did a lot of the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run.
Epic runs.
And it continued on. And I ended up applying and getting in, and I moved out to Dover, New Jersey to, just kind of take a chance on the pipe dream. Moved into the mansion, which was the original school. Like, he had bought a mansion and was teaching people out of it, which was, teaching people out of the mansion. And then he eventually ended up buying Adam and Andy, his sons, who were both comic artists.
And being a kid of the 90s, Adam and Andy's art was everywhere.
Oh, yeah, they were awesome. And they also responsible for Batman vs. Predator. So that was one of the first comics I'd seen. Yeah.
Wolverine. We're going to talk about Hulk, the big runs
X-Men,
of the 90s in Marvel.
Post Jim Lee X-Men,
yes.
With Andy, Kazar, just go on and on.
So the pedigree of the school it's enormous.
Like everyone
in the industry.
Yeah, a lot of people come out of that school getting work, and a lot of people that are currently working are in that. I got in there 2008 is my first year there. And I graduated in 2011. And I was in the next to last class to have Joe as a teacher before he passed away. So Joe taught my class. He taught one more year, then died during the summer, which is awesome. Joe was super cool. And he told us, not all of you are going to get jobs with DC and Marvel. We're going to put you in front of them. So we went to the DC offices when they were still in New York, and Marvel came to us and interviewed us. And he's like, not all of you are going to get jobs, but so you have to have a backup plan. So he put us to work on making a creator-owned thing, which was Human City, which I discussed earlier. So
I want to interject for a
Sure.
point, because this is a curious time period in comic book history, because this was now more and more creators, because of Vertigo, because of Image, they were realizing that there are not two doors to comics, that being Marvel or DC.
Right.
There are other options, and for some people, the other options were sweeter deals.
This is early Walking Dead. I remember the last week before I graduated, I think we were watching we're near the end of the first season of Walking Dead on TV, which is kind of crazy to think about. So that became a huge success, starting out as an independent comic, which gave us, there's an avenue, there's an open door, and not only that, it was kind of around the time of the rise of the comic book movie. So we got there, and Iron Man came out, Watchmen was coming out. I remember seeing Thor.
And to look back, that your very first movie, or one of the first ones that you ever saw, was Batman '89, which is credited as the thing that started this whole wave.
Right.
Superheroes are going to be in latex. Superheroes are not going to be all fun and games.
Right.
I mean, so you have a great background so far,
right?
In life, and now you're getting a formal education dealing with that at this amazing time,
and it was
in comic history,
and it was such an intense education to get to, because it's uprooting your life, moving to a new place in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, which is about 45 minutes to New York City, but it's not that easy to get there as when you're, a student with no money. But
big culture shock for you.
Yeah, and we're taking 10 classes a week, 5 days a week, high school hours. So we had homework all the time. We were just constantly working.
And when you say homework, give us an idea. What would homework be like?
That's a great question. I mean, depends on the class. But we had a handler in class our first year. which our homework was to basically take gridded paper and just do hash marks until and just do it over and over and over again. And like we had figure drawing class, so like one time an assignment was like draw 5 pages of just hands, and not just like a pair of hands per page. It was like fill the page up with like 10, 15 sets of hands, then do it 5 more times, and or 4 or 5 more times. And
when they had feet class, Rob Liefeld took that class, right?
Right, yeah.
And that's amazing. So you're looking at technical skills on very individual basis.
Right, and like so there were all sorts of classes, and then we had like storytelling classes, narrative classes, and that was when the Kuberts came in and taught. So Adam Kubert was my narrative teacher for my first year, and this was around the time that he and Andy had just signed the DC. And so Andy was working on Batman at the time, Adam was doing Action Comics, and then Adam ended up going back to Marvel during that time, and Andy was working on Flashpoint, while I was there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's huge.
It was
a huge
wild because like we
time.
knew about it, and like there was one time during my third year when Andy was working on Flashpoint, when he popped in, and he knew that myself and my friend Craig Cermak, who's doing a lot of great stuff at the moment, he did some stuff with Garth Ennis. He's doing some work for Archie right now. But Craig and I are big DC guys, and he goes, "Hey, Gavin, Craig, you guys want to see some Flashpoint pages?" And we were like, "Yes, of course." And he goes, "Yeah, I bet you would." And then just like left the room. Yeah, so homework all the time. The first, this is how intense it got. When Joe gave us the assignment to like work on our own thing, it was, not all of you are going to get the Marvel and DC job. So I want 5 pages and a cover of pencils for your own creation by next week. And we were like, by next week, that's 5 pages and a cover. We've got 9 other classes, Joe. What are you doing to us? But it was kind of just...
He was training you for the real world.
Oh, absolutely.
Because one thing that the 90s taught us is that those who were part of Marvel that couldn't keep deadlines did not have a job.
Absolutely.
Because the real world is, there's newsstands, there's comic shops that need product. You have got to figure out how time management. You have to draw accurately, quickly.
We're another spoke on the wheel. The wheel's going to keep on turning. So, so we did that, and Joe picked favorites too. So if you liked your stuff, you were on his good side. If you didn't, and you could tell you were like slacking, he would like let you know. I got to be one of his favorites, luckily.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. You have Mirror War up here. Yes. Is it all right if I just pass this around so people can see? Because what I love, my wife and I are hardcore comic collectors, and especially we have nearly every Star Trek comic going back from Gold Key and up. We have all this in our pull list. Right. So I'm so proud to be on the stage with you, because we have to say that you understand composition. You understand storytelling. You understand flow.
Thank you.
And this is going back to what you're talking about, what you were taught at the Joe Kubert School.
Right, and like storytelling is key, and good storytelling can make a bad script good. Is essentially like a lot of what we were taught. So we a lot of times there's some fill in the blanks that we have to do as artists to make things make sense. So I found myself doing that a lot with Trek. But the way it came to Trek, we're still, after I graduated, I self-published my own book. Kind of took that around the country. I was going to conventions here, Louisville, Chicago, Detroit, Columbus, Ohio, Pittsburgh. I did like about a 6-week thing where I was going to conventions every weekend. I came back home, ended with a gallery show in Fountain Square where I live. And then a little bit after that, I got hired to draw a book from an upcoming company called Blue Juice Comics. They asked me to draw this book called The Accelerators. And I ended up, that started off with just like I was living in an apartment with 4 of my friends. A house with 4 of my friends who were all in a band. So I ended up moving out of that house after I got the job offer into my own apartment. That job was only supposed to be 1 issue, and then that 1 issue became 2 issues, then became 5 issues, then became 6, so eventually became 20. So I've drawn 20 issues of that, And, I've been working for them for a long time on and off because, they went on a couple hiatuses here and there. But that led to the next thing, and everything just kind of piled.
Your portfolio and your work spoke for itself.
Right. And, every job just kind of flew into the next one, or flowed into the next one, to the point where, I started doing stuff for heavy metal. I started doing stuff for AT&T. I did some motion comics for them. Some, microchip companies I did some comics for that no one's ever going to see. And... I did a thing for Dan Harmon, which was kind of crazy. I got to do a 5-page story with Mark Waid. And then eventually, I'd kind of been in touch with IDW for a long time, a couple editors there, and it was always bad timing. It was either I was too busy or they didn't have anything. And they were keeping me on the radar. And eventually got to the point where I just I sent them an email of my newer stuff. And I wasn't expecting much because, I had kind of been playing tag with them for years. And I was just like, hey, this is what I'm up to. If you got anything, let me know. And they said, well, we've got this new Star Trek book that we're working on. And it was Mirror War, and it was 8 issues. They're like, I was looking for just a fill-in issue, just a one-shot.
Which IDW is known for having.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So let's just back up a little bit for those who are not familiar. How would you describe the company IDW Comics?
They're an interesting company because they're probably one of the top of the comic companies that isn't Marvel and DC that are producing content that's creator-owned. They create original content, and they have licensed properties. And some pretty good licensed property. Up until recently, they had Transformers and G.I. Joe. They no longer have those, but they've got Ninja Turtles. They've got My Little Pony, and they have Star Trek, and they had some Star Wars up until recently. Yeah,
and they're known for working with creators.
Oh yeah,
they realize you're human beings.
Oh yeah, they're just good people in general.
Exactly.
I've never had a problem with anyone at IDW that I've worked with. They've all been super professional.
To have this account was really something that you were happy about.
Yeah, it was one of those things, and it was good timing too, because I want to say 6 months before I got the offer, I'm also a wrestling dork, so I had been talking with WWE about doing some work for a wrestler they had at the time named Aleister Black, who's now over at AEW.
So what do you think about Aleister Black?
I love him.
It doesn't matter what you think.
He's great. It was crazy because they had asked me to do these vignette drawings to help bring him back, but it was around Royal Rumble time. I promise this is the short version of it. And they kind of kept me waiting. They're like, all right, we're going to worry about this after WrestleMania. WrestleMania time comes around, and I contact my guy, and I'm like, hey, we've been talking about this for 6 months, even to the point where I had to put a pitch package together for Vince McMahon, which is crazy.
Isn't that wild to think that, wrestling... Our characters, they're involved in the comic book universe. It makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. They are comic book characters. They're living comic book characters. They're buff people doing exaggerated fighting, which is perfect for reference whenever I need it. We were talking about what these vignettes were going to be, and I had contacted my guy, and he's like, yeah, this is happening. Don't worry. And then I read literally the next day after I talked to him that guy had gotten released from WWE. So I thought I'd lost that job. I contacted the wrestler, Aleister Black, and he was trying to get me back in, and then, long story, couldn't make it happen. So I was kind of like, I missed out on this big job. And then the Star Trek thing happened, and it was a 3-week tryout. It was, they had asked me to do it, and they're like, all right, well, we need you to do this. And then they were kind of keeping me waiting, and as I was waiting, I was doing more stuff to just show them, I can do this. Come on, let me have this. And finally and then they announced the series. And the Mirror War series started out with a 0 issue. Mm-hmm. So great guy named Carlos Naito.
Now, just to backtrack, the Mirror series has been going on in a series of mini-series for a number of years.
JK had drawn a couple of them as well, and then they had some other people doing other issues.
So it was mini-series after mini-series after mini-series, which are incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every Star Trek fan has to dip their toes into this.
Oh, yeah.
I got one of the guys at my local comic book store into this because when he pulled our comics out, he's like, "What's up with this buff Captain Picard?" And we're like, "It's a mirror universe." He goes, "I don't even like Star Trek, but I'm going to read this just because it has the buff Captain Picard."
That's the funny thing. I think that's the beauty of it is like I don't think you need. I think you kind of only need to know like the gist of the next generation.
And that's what I was just going to say. This is a perfect entry point for you to jump onto something, but it's also a perfect entry point for a casual reader that doesn't have to read 300 issues. IDW just recently published their 400th Star Trek comic.
Right.
You don't have to read all that. You can just jump in right here, Mirror War, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
So this was timing for you was excellent as far as the fan base and in your personal life.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it was just good timing, and like I had just wrapped up a book called Dead Legends 2 with my friend James, who is our creator-owned martial arts book. Very much a throwback to old school martial arts movies. Like I said, I was looking for a fill-in. They offered me the 8. I did the tryout, got the job, and then just jumped in immediately. Just ran with it, and it was fun. They let me get away with so much that I didn't think they would let me. Like as far as like the way I killed so many Klingons in this book. Like there's a point where I have Beverly Crusher shooting a Klingon in the back of the head, and I was like, they're gonna make me take that out. They didn't. But it's mirror universe, so we can get away with stuff like that.
And that's one of the funny things is when you look into speaking to other people involved in the industry, they always have these outlines of things you can do and can't do.
Right.
But with mirror universe, they kind of push that to the side because they realize this has to be the opposite.
It was a blank slate, and that's kind of one of the things now that when I'm working on more property stuff, I kind of say like, what are the rules? Like, what can I get away with? What's taking it too far? What's not enough, you know? Like, but with this, it was kind of just like, go wild. There was one death I drew in there where Data incinerates a guy in issue 2. My editor at the time was Megan Brown, and then she moved over to a different part of IDW, but Heather Antos ended up taking over after that. But Megan was basically like, I don't know if CBS is going to let you get away with this. And then they
you're doing good when that's in question, right?
And then they came back with the notes from CBS, and they were like, oh, CBS had a note on this page, but it's not that. It is just like something small up here. And I was like, okay, cool. And
I know that Patrick Stewart wants to make sure that he doesn't have a perfectly round head. That's one of the things that I heard in the DC days were the notations. Make sure I have a little point on his head.
Right.
And how was it dealing with the liaisons with CBS?
So it was nice because Megan and Heather both acted as a sort of shield for me. So I didn't really have to talk to them, to CBS specifically, because once you get that many people in on one email thread, it gets very convoluted, and like everyone's kind of talking over each other. Everybody wants to feel like they're doing their job. Mm-hmm. So Heather kind of acts as a shield, and she would compile all into one email and be like, this is everything they want. And it usually wasn't that bad. But like there was one point where there was a panel I had drawn Deanna Troi on, and they weren't happy with it. So I redrew it. Still rejected. Redrew it again. Rejected. Redrew it again. I was like, what's going on with this panel? So I was like, all right, I have to move on. I can't be on this page forever. So I just took a photo of Deanna Troi and just traced it, turned it in, rejected again. Like after like a trace drawing. Yeah, I did. Eventually I did like one little thing. They're like, that's it. And I was like, and they don't know what they want sometimes when it comes to that stuff, but then they know it when they see it. So, like, it was never really that bad. They never gave me any guff on the ships. They liked the way I drew ships. They liked the way I drew Klingons. And then it was just like a likeness thing every once in a while. And so I know that they sometimes run stuff by Frakes. They would run stuff by, it might have been Marina, actually, you know, her saying, that's not right, that's not right. But, like I don't know. I'm not in on those. I'm not privy to those calls. So they just kind of tell me after the fact. But like otherwise, it wasn't too bad. I didn't have too many times where it was like correction heavy, which I think was good.
So let's talk about the relationship that you have with the Tipton brothers.
Yeah.
With the story itself. How does that work out?
So they're deep divers. They've been into Star Trek as kids.
There's lots of fan service in these issues.
Oh yeah. They know it inside and out, and it's like they put in some deep cuts that I was just like, I have no idea what this is. And like I knew Star Trek peripherally, kind of when I started. Like I knew enough about it, but I never deep dove into it. And then once I got a gig, I watched all of Next Gen, and I'm still working my way through DS9. But they know everything, and it's wild. So they're putting in all these small details for me, and I'm like, and they kind of said what's your knowledge of Star Trek? And I'm like, it's not going to be as great as yours. So feel free to give me as much reference as possible. And they were great. So they'd send me things. They'd be like, hey, this is coming up in this script. Here's this. Here's this. Here's this. And I'd be able to draw from it. Usually not a problem. So we have our own little, once they found out I was going to be drawing it, they got in touch with me on Facebook Messenger. So we have our own private Facebook Messenger group, and we just kind of talk in there and goof off sometimes and, talk about.
Do things more the Marvel way or the DC way?
Oh,
That's it's industry talk for...
Yeah.
You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, Marvel method, the old school Marvel method was almost like a paragraph. And it's like, here's the issue. Here's what happens in the issue. Go nuts. They're very detailed. And since they're both writing it, I think they kind of trade off. They get the general outline of the script, and then they assign each other sections. So I never know which one wrote which, but it's...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I'm never sure who wrote what.
So they're
scene.
more the DC style of telling you page by page what they
panel
like
by
to
panel,
see.
yeah.
Panel by panel.
They are a fan of 7 to 8 panel pages. Oh my gosh, that became a thing after a while where I was just like, you guys need to take it easy on because and it's kind of cool because doing all that, we only had one true splash in the whole series, and that was in issue 6 when they built this big armada. And it's just a double page
spread.
But that warranted it. Oh yeah, it built up to it, and it I feel like it delivered. It was just a 2-page spread of just all these ships, which was great. They were easy to work with. They were super happy with how everything was going. They never had any notes. So any notes that I did get came from CBS or Heather, and Heather was great at notes. She's a great editor. My relationship with them was great.
Covers by J.K. Woodward.
J.K. was awesome. I didn't get to meet J.K.
Do you know what the covers are going to be beforehand?
No.
Or are you just, when you see it at the comic store, that's your first time seeing it?
There was one issue that came in, and I hadn't seen it. I think it was issue 7, or issue 6 came out, and then I saw the cover for issue 7 and at the end of the book, and I was like, whoa, that's the best one he's done. And so I didn't really get any insight. I didn't really get to, we were friendly over Twitter and Facebook or Instagram, whatever.
Because he's a West Coast guy.
Yeah, I think he's in LA. So, we had never met until I had literally finished up the last issue in the middle of June, and then I went to Heroes Con. And I had just finished the issue.
What an amazing experience.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Heroes is awesome. It's such a good show in Charlotte, North Carolina. And
you want to talk about deep dives into comic books, that's it.
Oh, yeah. They're great. And then JK was there, so I got to meet him and goof off with him and his kid and his partner for the first time. And saw him in New York about a month ago, which was great. He was supposed to show up to an all-Star Trek breakfast that we were supposed to have, but he got caught in traffic, so he missed it. But he's such a good dude. So I kind of wish we talked a little bit, and he was bummed that I didn't get covers on this run because he was doing covers. But but there's also a B and a C cover, and they had assigned all the cover work for this series before I came on board.
It's a different world. The way covers and interior arts, the synergy between them now, it's totally different.
Sure,
especially with all the alternate covers.
Right, now I'm guilty of it because I've been doing a lot of alternate covers for, like I said, for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and
which I'm so happy for you because that's a childhood passion.
Absolutely, that was on my bucket list, and it just worked out. So after Megan left, Heather Antos came in and took over as editor, and she had an assistant editor named Vanessa. Vanessa, I found out, was doing the assistant editing over on Turtles as well, right as the Turtles regime was changing, because Bobby Curnow had edited Turtles for over 10 years. And at the end of his last project with IDW was Last Ronin. So he was...
Huge success there.
Oh, man. It was awesome. So he's on his way out of Turtles, and so they bring in the new editor, Charles Beecham, who's great, and Vanessa is assisting him. So I just messaged Vanessa when I'm towards the end of my Trek run, and I say, hey, if there's a chance, I want to do some stuff for Turtles, if we can make it happen. She's like, yeah, that'd be great. Let me introduce you to Charles. A couple weeks later, they offered me my first cover, which came out 2 weeks ago. So they gave me a first cover. They offered me another cover a week later. And then a week after that, I get asked to try out for the follow-up to Last Ronin, which
is amazing.
Yeah. Which
I know this is a Star Trek convention, so there's a lot of people like, what's Last Ronin?
Yeah.
It's a massive storyline, which was an unprecedented success in the world.
It's about the last surviving Ninja Turtle in the world, and it takes place. It's very Dark Knight Returns of the Ninja Turtle.
That's a good
world.
way to explain it.
Which is great, funny because like Kevin and Peter were big Frank Miller guys.
That's
so,
86, sure.
Yeah, I got asked to try out for it. It's a funny way of like, and I confirmed this in New York, so I'm not just making excuses for myself. The Tom Waltz, who had wrote Ninja Turtles forever and was also an editor at IDW, it's kind of his baby, and he is also the editor of G.I. Joe as well. And IDW is losing G.I. Joe to Skybound. Tom Waltz asked his guy to do it. Charles, the new editor of Turtles, asked me to do it. Tom had seniority, so his guy won, which is fine. They're using my cover that was part of my tryout for it as an issue 1 cover, and some other stuff is coming up later, but I can't.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. So I'll be sticking around the Turtles universe for a little bit. I'm sure Star Trek will come calling now. I just did a cover for Resurgence, the new series they're doing that ties into their new video game. So they're keeping me on Star Trek too. So you're gonna get sick of me over at IDW.
Well, let me ask you this. So, do you remember in the 90s, there were actual Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures that were Star Trek characters? So, now, because you have your toes dipped in both pools, any chance we're going to get an alternate cover with a reference to that?
So it's funny. I love that. So it's funny because when I was at the Mission Chicago show,
that was the first time we met.
Right. I got to meet one of the CBS people that are it's kind of ominous to me. Like, because, Heather's always been my guard as far as that might be. And she, like, one of them came up to me and I was just kind of like in a goofy mood. I had just come off of my panel with Ming Chen. I was talking to her and I was just like, hey, Star Trek 90 and Turtles had that line of toys. Is there any chance we could make that a book? And she goes, never say never. And it was just one of those
things.
There's
Star Trek and Green Lantern crossover.
Yeah. She's like, if we can make it make sense, absolutely. And I was like,
and you're the man to do it. Yeah.
I'd love that. That'd be crazy. Draw Leo as a Vulcan or whatever. That would be fun. I'd love that. It's a little above my pay grade, but if I can trick somebody into it, I'm all for it.
We need a letter writing campaign. I think that's
right.
So, in closing, for those who now are being exposed to your work in Mirror War, what's the 1-minute pitch as people file out of this area and go to your table to meet you, which you do have a table.
Yeah, I have a table on the floor
to buy these.
I'd say, it's Star Trek: The Next Generation in the Mirror universe. We didn't get to explore it in the show, so we get to go crazy in the comics. But instead of exploring and discovering new worlds, we're out conquering and destroying new worlds and stabbing each other in the back. It's great. It's great fun.
It is. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For being part of this program. And Gavin Smith, I'm there from the StarPodTrek podcast. We look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.